is Carlton Cullins here in South Austin, Texas, and welcome to the Blue Sky Strongbox. Today is video 2 of a series that I'm doing over the next few weeks called Foundation. So if you're watching this video and you haven't seen the first video, go back and watch it. Find it. It's out there. It's free. Find it. Watch it. It's important. In the first video, I wanted you to figure out what you want. What are your goals? And write them down. Next, I want you to figure out why they're important to you. Why do you want these things? And write that down. Lastly, I talked about the importance of sleep and getting proper rest. I promise you, anything and everything you want to do in life will be made better when you feel rested. Everything, mind, body, heart, and soul, I can't overstate it enough. But enough of that. All this stuff brings us to where we're at today. Today, video 2, we're going to go over screening and assessment, this whole process. So what this basically means is we need to figure out what you need without doing harm. Rule number 1 in life is do no harm. But I work as a personal trainer. People come to me that I don't know. They tell me what they want. I ask them why they want it, why it's important. And the next we need to figure out what do they need. It may be something that you don't know. It's most certainly something that I probably don't know. How are we going to figure out what you need? We need to have a screening. We need to assess what we screen. So basically a screen is essentially that. It's like a big net. We're going to do a few things that look like tests. We're going to throw it all into this net and see what we catch. Whatever we catch, we're going to assess, and that's going to help us figure out the plan of where to go so you don't get hurt and that you don't waste a lot of time. You can get to your goal faster. So the main 3 areas we're trying to figure out with this screen is where you're at, what obstacles may be in the way in the future, and which one of those obstacles, and it may be more than one, do we need to prioritize working on first. That's essentially what we're trying to do. So the major area that we need to begin with is medical, and this is really serious, so listen up. If you have any medical concerns, conditions, you're on medication, you've had an injury, you recently had surgery, anything that's questionable, you need to go to a doctor, a health professional, and get the okay before you go. The last thing you want to do is hurt yourself, especially when you start messing with diet, exercise, stuff like that. It's easy. You could get hurt. We want to make sure that you're good to go, and that way you'll be safe. So it's really important. But when we talk about medical stuff, you're trying to get a glimpse of everything. You want to talk about your past history. You want to bring everything up to right now. There's 4 main areas of biomarkers that I like, and biomarkers are just stuff, health stuff we need to look at. The first area is going to be body composition stuff. So we do need, I know a lot of people don't want to do this, but we need to get a starting weight. So you need a scale that you can weigh on that's accurate. We want to get that down. I typically don't like to weigh people too often. I usually only weigh people once a month at the beginning of the month. But when people come to me and I don't know them, they're new, the first session, the first thing we're going to do is weight. I'm going to write that number down. It doesn't matter what it is. Don't worry about it. Just write that number down. You need a starting weight. The next thing is measurements. Occasionally I get somebody who seems really uncomfortable or they're really heavy, and I may skip the measurements in the beginning, but essentially I measure most people, and I typically do 2 measurements. You can, some people measure 10 measurements. I like the 2 main ones, and that is going to be your waist and your hip measurement. To do the waist, I usually always do it around the belly button. That way in the future, if I want to measure again, I can just find the belly button and put the measurements, put the measuring tape on there and get that number. Some people will have a waist that slides down and it doesn't match up with the belly button. If they do, I would measure in the thinnest part of the waist, and that you just do that again in the future and make a note of that. But that's the first number. The hip measurement is simple. You have everybody put their feet all the way together, feet pointing straight ahead, feet together, and then measure the biggest part of their butt, the roundest part of your hip. So if you're doing this on your own, turn sideways in the mirror, feet together, and take the biggest measurement of your hip and write that down. Doesn't matter what the number is. Don't freak out over how much you weigh, the number, all this stuff. You just need this information written down. I'm not a huge fan of BMI. I'm not a huge fan of like those scales that tell you your ideal weight. There's some value to some of them, but a lot of people freak out over them. Don't freak out. We're just trying to see where you're at. So when you get these numbers and write them down, the next thing I would say is, when was the last time you had blood work, a basic blood panel that you would get at the doctor? That stuff's really important to make sure you don't have any red flags on there. If you do, then you need to talk with your doctor and make sure it's really important. The next thing is blood pressure. You can go most drugstores and check your blood pressure for free, or maybe your quarter. That's really important. You want to make sure those numbers are safe. You don't want to start exercising if those numbers are dangerous. So we get all that information. I have it written down, and then we're going to move on to the next stuff. So this is going to be really important. We need to, we've already established what you want. What are your goals and why? Now we need to figure out, are you really ready? Being ready is important. I look at things like a scale. If you want to get an A in the class, then you've got to do A work. You've got to be ready to put in the work. If you want to get an A in the class, you do A work. If you want to just get by and get a C minus and get a 70 and just get by, then you just barely do stuff and maybe you can skim by, but you're gonna do crap work, you're gonna get crap results. If you don't care at all, you just get a big old flat 0 or even an F, you just fail, then that's what you get. If you do F work, you get F results. So keep that in mind. You know, I like to next get into talking with people, and you're gonna do this with yourself if you're doing this alone, is lifestyle. I need to know what you do every day, how your sleep schedule is. Do you work? Do you go to school? What do you do with your day? What do you do with your free time? Basically, what I'm really trying to figure out is how much stress and how much time do you have available in your life. Some people may work 2 jobs. They may be a single parent, has 3 kids. You may have health concerns on top of that. You may have a job where you work at the airport with dealing with people and it's really stressful, and maybe the last thing you need to do is start exercising really hard right now because you're working 80 hours a week and you don't have much free time and your blood pressure is really high. The last thing you'd want to do is add in a lot of high intensity exercise. So you need to figure all this stuff out. Lifestyle is really important. You want to see how much stress you have in your life. The next thing I said, I mentioned sleep earlier. I mentioned sleep just a second ago. Sleep is the next thing I ask about. And I usually try to figure out what people's normal sleep schedules are, if they have any issues. And in my mind, I start kind of jotting down quickly on a scale. If it's kind of a 1, 2, 3 scale. 3 is going to be everything is really good. It's like an A. 2 is going to be like a C. And a 1 I'm going to give to things that are probably failing, an F. So 1, 2, or 3. So when I ask people about their lifestyle, their stress, I'm looking. 3 would be everything's good. 1 is they got a really stressful lifestyle. When I move to sleep, is it bad? Is it good? Is it okay? I'm gonna make notes. Then I'm gonna ask about diet stuff. Diet, you could talk all day long about diet. In the beginning, I'm just trying to get a snapshot. I'm trying to see what you know. So I'm trying to figure out where you're at. So if you don't know, I'm going to start asking you kinds of stuff that you eat, how often you eat, yada, 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 and try to give you a 1, 2, or 3 scale, a grade, and then move on. I'm just trying to give this an assessment. We don't have to get everything. We're just trying to figure out where things are really ugly and where things are really good. Next, I want to know exercise history. Do you have any exercise history? Do you have any previous experience working with a personal trainer? Do you have things you're scared of, things that you love? Are you active every day? Have you never exercised? Do you even know what exercise is? I mean, it sounds crazy, but these are things I need to ask and figure out, and I just get that from talking to people. If you're doing this yourself, you just got to be honest about it and write this kind of stuff down. So I may even give us a grade on that, a 1, 2, or 3 on that as well. So the next 3, we're going to move to the next 3 areas. The big areas as far as the physical stuff is, you need to look at your range of motion, your strength, and your stamina. So these are going to be kind of big areas. Each one's going to have a few things involved. So make sure you're writing this stuff down and ask questions. There's a lot of information. So range of motion, to keep this short, I essentially want to start with the neck and move down really quickly. I want to see if people have neck issues. I mean, if somebody comes in and their neck sticks out like that, I already know you have neck issues. But I want to see how well you move your neck. If you can put your arms overhead without leaning backwards. A lot of stuff. I want to make a look at your wrist, knees, hips, back, bending over feet, all this kind of, do your feet bend, your ankles bend, all this kind of stuff. It's a pretty long assessment, but there's a lot of different things I do. I essentially like to see the arms overhead. I essentially like to see if you could touch your toes. It's not a deal breaker if you can't. I just want to make a note, see where you're at on that. I typically bring people over next, and I do this thing called a super stretch. I grab people on a pole, and I see how far they can comfortably go down and squat, and then come up and straighten their legs. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but I can tell a lot about somebody's flexibility and range of motion when they do that. If they're tight here, tight there, does anything hurt? Do they seem nervous to go down in a deep squat? Does it hurt when their legs are straight? I want to see all these things, and I'm making notes, 1, 2, or 3 often on the scale. There's also a test called the get down test, the get up, get down test that a South American doctor, I believe, came up with. You can research that. I often perform that test. Basically, you go from a standing position, you try to sit down and get back up without using your hands. It's okay if you use your hands. It's okay if you do poorly on any of these tests. But it just gives me or it gives you an idea where you're at. What are the big areas that you need to work on? Lastly, there's a screening thing called the FMS, a functional movement screen developed by Lee Burton and Gray Cook, who are great guys. They're very intelligent. The FMS has 7 screening tests. If I'm training somebody, I've got enough time, an athlete, I may do all 7 of the tests that are in this thing and it's in the FMS. But there's definitely 2. I like the shoulder mobility test and the active straight leg test. I typically test most people of those. You can look those up on the internet. They're really good tests. Lastly, I may put somebody on the ground and check their range of motion and their shoulders and see how if they have any movement intelligence as far as being able to move their ball and socket in their shoulders, ball and socket in their hips. Can they move without their back all compromising and stuff like that? Can they move their arm and leg without their back bending? So there's more tests that I do. I may end with a little up dog, down dog kind of yoga flow thing to see how well you feel with your hands down and your feet pressed into the ground and see what kind of range of motion you have and all that kind of stuff. But that's essentially what I check for range of motion. Again, I'm just looking to see if there's any areas that are really bad. If anything hurts, you get a 0. A complete 0, and if it's really bad, you may need to refer out to a physical therapist, a chiropractor, a doctor, something like that. So I just want a little side note, if anything hurts really bad, you need to go get that checked out. But now I'm going to move to basic strength test. I typically like to have people, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, walk out. I just tell people, hey, I want you to walk out all the way to flat and walk back up with your hands to a standing position. I want to see what that looks like. I want to see if it hurts. I want to see if you're actually able to do that. Next, I usually check people on a plank. I have people do a solid plank. I use a timer and I want to see how long they can hold it. I don't worry about good and bad numbers. I just want to see where you're at. If somebody does really well with a plank test, they can easily hit a minute or 2. I may move them over and do what I consider an L-sit, where you hold on here. It's a pretty advanced test. You don't want to hurt yourself doing that, but if somebody can do a plank easily, usually can do that. This is going to move me into what I call the British study. There was a study in Britain a few years ago that for many, many years they studied a lot of people over the age of 80. They wanted to see what things they had in common with them. The 4 main areas they said that were important for health and longevity that they concluded from this study was the ability to squat down and squat back up. Basically squat down to a toilet and get back up with no problem. Can you stand on one leg for say 30 seconds easily, not holding on to anything, and do the same thing on the other leg? The next thing was grip strength. You could squeeze something and check your grip, but I like to move people over here and see if they can hold their own body weight up and just count how many seconds they can. If that hurts, I won't let somebody do that, but I want to see how well your hands work. When I grip, make sure the thumbs are around. You don't want to grip like that, thumbs all the way around. Checking the hand grip. The last of the 4 things on that British study is walking speed. If you can walk fast, they say that you will live longer if you're longer typically than somebody who walks really slow. So later on in the assessment, I usually have people go walk for a little bit. I just kind of monitor and see how well they can walk. I'll walk right next to them and I may walk fast to see how they hold up. So these are things that I check. I think they're really, really important. If somebody can squat down really easily, I may do a split squat with them where you put one leg forward and I may do both sides and see if they can do that. That often tells me a lot of stuff. I typically want to check their upper body strength as well. I want to see if they can do a push-up. If they can't, I may modify that to an easier push-up. And then I may do a body weight row using some TRX bands or some kind of gymnastic rings. And I want to just see how well you move and can pull your body that way. And lastly, if you've done every good on all those tests, I may give you a couple of heavy weights in the hand. 35, 45 pounds in each hand. See how well you can walk around the room carrying those in each hand. So that's going to end the strength portion. I'm making a lot of notes on that. Looking for any major weaknesses. The last thing is going to be stamina. Some people call this cardio. You can call it whatever you want to. I just want to see how much stamina you have. And so we need to assess that. The easiest assessment is I walk down to the end of my street with my clients and back. It takes about 7 minutes. I just want to walk down there and walk back and see how well they breathe, see how easy or how difficult that was. If it was really easy, then I may move to something else the next time. I may do a bike test. I have a Schwinn Airdyne, a dual action fan bike. I may just put a client on there and have them go for 7 minutes and I make a note on how far they go in that 7 minutes. Before I do the walk test or the bike test, I usually measure the resting heart rate, write that number down. Then we're gonna walk the test or do the bike for 7 minutes. Immediately when we're done, I use a pulse oximeter and I check the heart rate after the exercise, immediately after, and then I time it. I wait, in 1 more minute, I'm gonna check it again, and I'm gonna see if your heart rate has come down any. Again, I'd like to see maybe 20 beats come down, but again, the number's not important. We're just trying to figure out where you're at so we can figure out where you wanna go and where you need to go. So that's it. That's the basic stamina stuff. I don't make it any more complicated than that. All I'm trying to look is see where your scores are really low, and we're going to work on bringing those up. You may be really good in areas. We might not need to focus so much on those right now. I want to see if you can demonstrate independence. If there's certain things you can't do, you can't hold your body weight up, you can't squat and get back down, you are not, in my opinion, establishing independence with your body. You are dependent on other people, you're depending on holding on to stuff. That's potentially could kill you in the future. So I want you to be safe, strong, you need to have a lot of stuff. So we're looking at a lot of things today. We're trying to ultimately look at all this stuff on the screen and this net that we've caught, and we want to figure out what the most limiting factors are. And then we're going to figure out the plan on how to remedy those, make those better, and get you to your goal. So the next video, we're going to talk about the plan. I know this video was long. There's no way around it. If you have any questions, I'm here to help, and I will see you next time.